For 5 seasons, living single looked like the perfect dream. A group of friends living it up in a Brooklyn brownstone, making us laugh like they were really family. But what the cameras didn't show was a constant war being fought behind the scenes. The cast wasn't just delivering punchlines, they were battling their own network, pushing back against betrayals, unfair treatment, and decisions that could have destroyed everything. And now, decades later, the truth of what went down is finally out, and it's way messier than anyone watching at home could have guessed. At the center of this show was Queen Latifah as Khadijah James, the ambitious magazine publisher trying to hold it all together. By her side was her quirky cousin Sinclair, played by Kim Coles, and her stylish childhood friend Regine Hunter, brought to life by Kim Fields. Across the hall, you had TC Carson as the smooth and sophisticated Kyle Barker, and John Henton as Overton, the big-hearted handyman. And of course, Erica Alexander as Maxine Shaw, the sharp-tongued lawyer who could steal a scene just by walking in and raiding the fridge. The secret that almost erased Maxine Shaw. But do you know the first thing the cast of Living Single never told fans is that Maxine Shaw, the wittiest lawyer we all loved, was almost erased from the show. Network executives claimed she was too strong and too unlikable for audiences. At just 27 years old, creator Yvette Lee Bowser was forced into a corner. But instead of giving in, she fired back with a shocking ultimatum. No Max, no show. And trust me, this was only the beginning of the battles brewing behind the brownstone walls. The executives didn't want to lose Bowser, so they made a compromise that shaped the entire series. Max could stay, but she wasn't allowed to live with the other women. Instead, she had to live across the street. That one decision is why fans always saw her bursting through the hallway with dramatic entrances that weren't just scripted comedy, but the mark of a backstage war. What looked like a funny quirk to fans was actually a scar from the very first fight for authenticity. Every time Max slammed the door open with a biting remark, it wasn't just a character beat. It was proof that Bowser had won against the network and protected the soul of the show. To audiences, it came off as an effortless charm, but behind the scenes, it was a survival strategy. Without that battle, Max wouldn't have existed, and Living Single would have lost the very character that gave it its edge. And if you think almost erasing Max was shocking, wait until you hear one of the most surprising secrets the cast of Living Single never told fans was that the family bond on screen wasn't real at the start. When the show premiered in August 1993, the cast members had only just met. They were strangers asked to act like lifelong friends, which made their chemistry look natural, but was actually pure acting talent. Kim Fields later admitted it was a weird dynamic where fiction had to become fact overnight. And this little-known truth is only the first layer of what makes the story shocking. Fake family, real mothers. The producers found a clever way to make the on-screen bonds feel deeper, even though the actors barely knew each other. They secretly brought in real family members to play TV relatives. Queen Latifah's real-life mother, Rita Owens, stepped into the role of Khadijah James's mom. It added a hidden level of truth, because when Latifah was hugging her mom on screen, she was hugging her real mom in front of millions of viewers. Fans watching in 1993 had no idea they were witnessing something that personal. And if that feels unexpected, wait until you hear about the second real mom hiding in plain sight. Kim Fields, who played Regine Hunter, had her actual mother cast too. Her mother, actress Chip Fields, appeared on the show as Regine's mom, Laverne Hunter. This wasn't a simple cameo. It was an intentional move to add authenticity to a show already breaking barriers. By weaving these real family ties into the sitcom, the creators blurred the line between performance and reality. For audiences, it felt like heartwarming acting, but in truth, it was genuine mother-daughter interaction happening right on set. And this wasn't just a fun Easter egg. It changed the whole emotional depth of the show in ways no one realized. Think about it. Most sitcom moms were played by random actresses who had to pretend they shared a history with the character. But when Rita Owens looked at Khadijah with concern, it wasn't fake. When Chip Fields teased Regine, it wasn't just a line from a script. It was layered with years of real-life memories between mother and daughter. That hidden truth gave Living Single a kind of grounding and authenticity that no other show on air in 1993 could match. But believe it or not, even the world they lived in wasn't exactly what it seemed. The set of the famous Brooklyn brownstone had its own secret. Viewers thought the characters were living in a fresh, custom-built New York backdrop. In reality, the brownstone wasn't new at all. It was a recycled set, carried over from the 1989 sitcom Family Matters. That show was filmed in Chicago, but the production team reused the exact set pieces for Living Single's Brooklyn setting. To millions of fans, it looked like a brand new stage. But behind the camera, it was a thrifty trick straight out of the Warner Brothers playbook. In Season 1, while viewers were falling in love with Khadijah, Maxine, Regine, Sinclair, Kyle, and Overton, they were really watching stories unfold inside a repurposed house that Steve Urkel once walked through. It shows how the industry worked in the early 90s. Networks like Fox and Warner Brothers would reuse whatever they had on hand instead of building new sets. The cast was trying to break ground in television, while behind the scenes, they were literally working with leftovers from another show. And what makes this revelation even wilder is how seamless it looked. The Friends heist. Nobody talks about then. In 1994, only 1 year after Living Single premiered on Fox, NBC launched Friends. Both shows centered on 6 friends navigating life and love in a big city, one in Brooklyn and the other in Manhattan. The similarities were impossible to ignore, but what fans didn't know was that Friends wasn't just coincidence. It was a direct response to the success of Living Single. And what you've heard so far is nothing compared to the jaw-dropping confession that came years later. Queen Latifah eventually revealed the smoking gun. NBC's president at the time, Warren Littlefield, was asked in an interview which show he wished he had on his network. His answer was simple: Living Single. Not long after, NBC rolled out Friends with the exact same setup. 6 young people sharing apartments, swapping jokes, and stumbling through adulthood in the city. It was like NBC took the blueprint and repackaged it for a different audience. And the shocking part is, they didn't even try to hide it. Kim Coles, who played Sinclair James, didn't mince words when asked about the connection. She said with zero hesitation that Living Single influenced Friends 100%. To her, it wasn't a theory, it was a fact. The timing, the format, the characters, all of it lined up too perfectly. While Living Single gave audiences a bold, unapologetic look at Black life in Brooklyn, Friends was the polished, heavily marketed version aimed at mainstream white audiences. And that's where injustice really shows its teeth. Both shows were filmed on the exact same Warner Brothers lot, but the treatment couldn't have been more different. Friends was showered with millions in marketing, larger budgets, and huge salaries for its cast. Meanwhile, the stars of Living Single were left to fight for basic respect, scraping by with a fraction of the support. TC Carson, who played Kyle Barker, later said watching Friends get everything while his own cast got less was a slap in the face. And if you think this imbalance was unfair, the details get even more brutal from here. While Friends climbed to international stardom, plastered on billboards, and dominating primetime, Living Single was left in its shadow. The very network that had admitted it wanted the show simply created its own version and invested everything into it. For fans, it seemed like 2 similar shows running at the same time. But behind the scenes, it was more like one show being deliberately undercut to pave the way for another. And if that doesn't sting, the next secret about how this shadow rivalry played out on the same lot will cut even deeper. The silent slap in the face, TC Carson, who played the smooth-talking stockbroker Kyle Barker, never sugarcoated what it felt like working on the Warner Brothers lot during the mid-1990s. He said it flat out: Friends got everything. Bigger checks, fancier sets, lavish marketing campaigns, and endless studio backing. Meanwhile, the cast of Living Single, filming just a stone's throw away, had to fight for every ounce of respect. It wasn't just a matter of dollars, it was a matter of dignity. And the sting of that unfairness only gets sharper the deeper you look. Kim Coles, who played the sweet and bubbly Sinclair, once shared a story that cut right to the core of the divide. At an event, she introduced herself to Lisa Kudrow, who played Phoebe on Friends. Kim tried to explain she was from Living Single, that other show that came first with the same setup. Kudrow, polite but blank, had no idea what she was talking about. To Kim, it was a moment of painful clarity. The Friends cast lived in such a bubble of fame and promotion, they didn't even know the show they were accused of copying existed. And that kind of erasure wasn't accidental. It was systemic. While the media hailed Friends as fresh and groundbreaking, Living Single was treated like it wasn't even in the same league. The cast didn't get the recognition of rivals. They weren't competing against Friends in the eyes of the industry. They were simply invisible. The studio poured every resource into making one show a global phenomenon, while quietly pushing the other aside. And here's the part that most fans never realized while they laughed along every Thursday night. Behind the smiles and jokes, the cast of Living Single carried the weight of that erasure every single day. They knew they were trailblazers, yet they watched their own blueprint get handed over, polished up, and sold back to the world as something brand new. Fans saw sitcom magic. But just across the lot, bitterness and betrayal were simmering under the surface, a silent slap in the face that no one outside those studio walls could hear. And if you thought being erased in real time was the harshest blow, wait until you hear about the way the network turned on TC Carson personally, and how his firing shattered the cast. Body-shaming scandal. Another shocking secret from the set of Living Single was the relentless pressure put on Kim Coles, who played the lovable and quirky Sinclair James. Before the start of every single season, her manager would get a call from executives with the same message: Kim had to lose weight. This wasn't framed as a suggestion or gentle advice. It was a demand, and if she didn't comply, the writers would be ordered to lace the scripts with cruel fat jokes at her expense. And what sounds like a casual threat was actually a weapon used to break her confidence. The cast, however, refused to let that happen. When Kim confided in Erica Alexander, the woman behind the razor-sharp Maxine Shaw, the response was immediate and fierce. Erica told her point blank, "I won't read those jokes." That solidarity was rare in Hollywood at the time, especially for black actresses constantly boxed in by stereotypes, and Erica wasn't standing alone. Queen Latifah backed her without hesitation, making it clear that their show would not become a playground for cheap body-shaming gags, and that kind of united front was something the executives never expected. Behind the scenes, the women created their own sanctuary inside their dressing rooms. Instead of tearing each other down, they undressed in front of each other without judgment, turning those spaces into little bubbles of encouragement. They compared their bodies openly, not to compete, but to remind each other that every shape, every curve was worth celebrating. In an industry that constantly demanded smaller waists and flatter stomachs, these women built their own rules and lived by them. And what fans saw as simple confidence on screen was actually the result of a private rebellion no one outside the set ever knew about. It was body positivity before the world even had a name for it. Their dressing rooms weren't just places to change costumes. They became rallying grounds for self-love and mutual defense. Every time Kim Coles delivered a funny line with radiant energy, she was standing on the shoulders of her castmates' support. And every time Max and Khadijah refused to let a fat joke sneak into the script, they were quietly rewriting the rules of representation on television. And if you think that was powerful, the next secret shows how even grief and loss were carried into the show, hidden in plain sight for fans who never knew. Queen Latifah's secret grief, one of the most heartbreaking truths hidden in Living Single, was carried quietly by Queen Latifah herself. Before the show even began filming in 1993, she suffered the devastating loss of her older brother, Lancelot Jr., who was killed in a motorcycle accident in 1992. Fans tuning in each week saw her shine as the ambitious and witty Khadijah James, but few ever knew that behind the smile was someone still mourning a brother taken too soon. And the way she kept his memory alive on set is something no fan ever figured out. Every single day, Khadijah appeared on screen with a key dangling around her neck. To audiences, it looked like just another piece of character styling, a funky accessory to match her strong personality. But in reality, that key belonged to the very motorcycle that her brother had been riding when he died. Queen Latifah wore it as a silent tribute, a personal memorial that never left her side, even while the cameras were rolling. And once you know the truth, that small accessory takes on an entirely different weight. Kim Coles later revealed how much pain Queen Latifah carried during those early seasons. The two shared a dressing room, and Kim said she often felt like it was her job to play the court jester to the Queen. She tried to keep Latifah laughing, cracking jokes, and lightening the mood, even when the grief was heavy in the room. To the outside world, Latifah was holding it all together. But behind the curtain, she was leaning on her castmates just to get through the day. And if you thought that hidden memorial was moving, the next secret about betrayal inside the cast itself is even more devastating. The brutal firing that broke the show. The next secret is one that cut to the heart of Living Single and left scars that never healed. TC Carson, who played the suave and intellectual Kyle Barker, wasn't just another actor on set. He became the voice of the cast. He spoke up when executives and writers tried to reduce Kyle and Overton into buffoonish stereotypes. For Carson, it wasn't about ego or money. It was about protecting the integrity of characters who represented Black men with dignity and complexity on national television. And his fight for authenticity came at a devastating cost. Executives didn't see Carson as a leader. They saw him as a problem. He was branded difficult in meetings, and producers went as far as to tell him the rest of the cast listened to him too much. It was their way of painting him as the root of all conflict. Instead of valuing his honesty, they treated his pushback as defiance. The man fighting to keep the show's legacy strong became the target of a network that wanted obedience above all else, and the betrayal that followed was colder than anyone expected. Toward the end of season 4, Kyle's storyline suddenly sent him off to London for a job opportunity. Behind the scenes, Carson suspected he was being written out and asked directly if he was being fired. The producers looked him in the eye and lied. They promised they would never break up the group, but the truth hit him in the harshest way possible. After his final episode aired, his lawyer called with the news. His contract wasn't being renewed. That's how Carson learned he had been fired, not from the network, but from his attorney. And that cruel exit shattered the foundation of the show. Erica Alexander, who played Maxine Shaw, later broke down describing how lost she felt after his firing. The witty, combative, and romantic sparring between Max and Kyle had been a central pillar of Living Single. Without him, she admitted, she didn't even know how to be Max without Kyle. The dynamic that carried so much of the show's charm was ripped away overnight. From that moment on, the chemistry that made the brownstone feel alive never fully returned. And if you thought this firing was brutal, wait until you see how the cast picked themselves up after the brownstone doors finally closed. Life after the brownstone. When the brownstone doors finally closed in 1998, the cast of Living Single didn't fade away. They carried the lessons of struggle, resilience, and solidarity into their real lives, each one carving out a new legacy. and what they built after the show ended is just as shocking and inspiring as what they endured on set. And the paths they took prove the story of living single never really ended. Queen Latifah transformed from sitcom star to full-blown Hollywood powerhouse. Already a rap icon before the show, she pushed even further after, eventually leading the hit CBS drama The Equalizer. In that role, she didn't just act. She created opportunities, providing jobs for hundreds of people while ensuring Black women were seen in powerful leading roles on primetime television. She also embraced motherhood and stayed the glue of the living single family, keeping their group chat alive decades later. And if you thought her journey was big, the rest of the cast's transformations were just as powerful. Kim Fields took a different path. Known first for Facts of Life and then Living Single, she reinvented herself behind the camera as a director. She helmed episodes of Kenan and Kel and multiple Tyler Perry projects before stepping back in front of the camera on Netflix's The Upshaws alongside Wanda Sykes and Mike Epps. On top of that, she launched her own coffee brand and a wellness platform called Refresh by Kim Fields, proving her reinvention wasn't limited to television. And she wasn't the only one who turned hardship into reinvention. Kim Coles faced her darkest years after living single. Depression and financial struggles nearly derailed her career, but she found new strength as a motivational speaker and author. Today, she helps others find their voices through her Wisdom GIFTs movement and keeps her connection to the sitcom alive by co-hosting the Reliving Single podcast with Erica Alexander. For fans who remembered her as the sweet and quirky Sinclair, her resilience in real life became just as inspiring as her character's optimism on screen. And Erica Alexander took her own fight beyond Hollywood. Channeling Maxine Shaw's fierce energy, Erica co-founded Color Farm Media, a company dedicated to telling stories from underrepresented communities. She co-produced the award-winning documentary John Lewis, Good Trouble, and The Big Payback, which explored the case for reparations in America. At the same time, her acting career never slowed, with acclaimed roles in Get Out, American Fiction, and the series Run the World. She turned her character's fictional activism into real-world impact. And while Erica fought with stories, TC Carson fought with his voice. After his painful firing, Carson reinvented himself as one of the most successful voice actors of his generation. For nearly a decade, he was the original voice of Kratos in Sony's blockbuster God of War video game series. He also gave life to Jedi Master Mace Windu in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. But Carson never abandoned his first love, music. He became a celebrated jazz vocalist, releasing multiple albums and even opening his own jazz club in Atlanta. The man executives labeled difficult built a career on his own terms, and John Henton's story might be the most dramatic of all. In September 2000, just 2 years after living single ended, he survived a near-fatal car accident caused by drunk driving. The crash shattered both his legs, broke 9 teeth, and destroyed his left eye socket. His face was so damaged that doctors needed a photograph of him to begin reconstructive surgery. Yet after that long recovery, Henton chose resilience. He stepped back from the spotlight, focused on his health, and eventually returned to stand-up comedy, performing in clubs across the country. Today, he makes audiences laugh on his own terms, a living symbol of survival. What looked like a happy, feel-good comedy was also a war zone for respect, dignity, and survival. And that's the real revelation. Even the brightest sitcoms can hold darker truths, the kind you never see when the studio audience is laughing.